Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment.
What happens when Hollywood's most stoic action star, a man whose entire career has been built on controlled intensity and unshakable composure, finds himself ambushed on live television by a host determined to tear him down, mark his life's work, and goad him into a reaction? What unfolds isn't just another uncomfortable celebrity interview. It's a detonation. It's the moment when British restraint finally snaps, when decades of professionalism give way to justifiable fury, and when one of daytime television's most aggressive hosts learns the hard way that pushing the wrong person too far has consequences. This is the story of how Jason Statham walked onto the View set, expecting a routine promotional appearance, and instead delivered one of the most devastating takedowns in talk show history, not through violence or theatrics, but through something far more powerful. Controlled verbal annihilation that left Joy Behar looking smaller than anyone had ever seen her before. Before we dive into the complete destruction that followed, understand what you're witnessing here. This isn't just about an actor defending his work against criticism. This is about the toxic dynamic that has infected modern celebrity journalism. The moment when someone who'd maintained professionalism through hundreds of interviews finally reached his limit, and the shocking reality that hosts who've spent careers attacking guests without consequences can still be shocked when someone fights back with intelligence and precision. The confrontation between Jason Statham and Joy Behar became legendary, not because of raised voices or dramatic walkouts, but because millions of viewers watched someone systematically dismantle a bully using nothing but calm logic, righteous anger, and devastating truth. What you're about to read is the anatomy of how quiet intensity destroys theatrical aggression, and why watching Joy Behar get intellectually eviscerated by someone she'd underestimated became one of the most satisfying moments in talk show history. The morning Jason Statham arrived at the View studio, everything seemed routine, professional, choreographed, like the hundreds of promotional appearances he'd done throughout his career. He was there to discuss his latest action film, another entry in a franchise that had made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. The setup was standard. Arrive early, brief chat with producers about approved topics, makeup and microphone check, walk onto set, smile for cameras, answer softball questions, plug the movie, thank the hosts, exit gracefully. Easy, efficient, professional. Jason walked onto the set with his characteristic presence that controlled energy that made him compelling on screen. Not the flashy charisma of some stars, but something more grounded, more real. The British action hero who'd built a career on playing competent professionals, facing impossible situations with calm determination. The audience applauded warmly, genuinely pleased to see him. These were fans who'd watched him in the Fast and Furious franchise, in the Transporter series, in countless other high-octane films that had entertained millions globally. The opening moments proceeded normally. Whoopi Goldberg offered a professional welcome. Sarah Haynes smiled warmly. Sunny Hostin nodded respectfully. Everything was going according to plan, following the familiar rhythm of celebrity promotional interviews that make up so much of daytime television. Then Joy Behar opened her mouth, and the entire dynamic shifted in an instant. So, Jason. Joy began with that familiar smirk that regular viewers recognized immediately, the expression that preceded pointed questions designed to make guests uncomfortable rather than facilitate genuine conversation. I have to ask about something that's been bothering me. Your movies, they're basically just violence, porn, aren't they? I mean, when are you going to make something that actually has substance? The other hosts shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eyes widened. This wasn't the typical warm welcome guests usually received. This was an attack, unprovoked, aggressive, and deliberately insulting, launched before Jason had been on set for even 2 minutes. Jason, maintaining his characteristic calm, leaned back slightly, and raised an eyebrow. His expression didn't change dramatically, but anyone who knew his work could recognize the micro-adjustments, the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes sharpened with focus. He'd been insulted before in interviews, had dealt with critics who dismissed action films as lesser cinema. But being called violence porn on live television within seconds of sitting down crossed a line. "Well, Joy," Jason replied in his distinct London accent, his voice perfectly controlled, "I think that's a rather narrow view of what I do. These films employ thousands of people, stunt performers, camera operators, set designers, visual effects artists. They entertain millions around the world, and they tell stories about loyalty, family, standing up for what's right. Not sure how that qualifies as what you just called it." It was a measured, professional response, defending his work without being defensive, establishing his position without attacking back. Most celebrities would have stopped there, perhaps pivoted to discussing the new film, let the insult slide in favor of maintaining the appearance of civility. But Joy Behar wasn't interested in civility. She was interested in confrontation, in generating viral moments, in proving something to herself or her audience by tearing down someone who couldn't really fight back on equal terms. "Oh, please, Jason," Joy said, leaning forward, her voice taking on that condescending tone. She was famous for the verbal equivalent of patting someone on the head while explaining why they're wrong. "Let's be honest here. Your character basically just drives fast cars and punches people. Where's the art in that? Where's the social commentary? Don't you think you have a responsibility to use your platform for something more meaningful?" Whoopi tried to interject, recognizing Joy was crossing into territory that would make this interview uncomfortable for everyone. "Joy, maybe we should." No, it's fine," Jason said, holding up a hand. His jaw was tightening now, the first visible sign that Joy's needling was getting under his skin, despite his professional composure. "I'm curious to hear more about Joy's perspective on what constitutes meaningful entertainment. It was a trap, subtly set. Jason was giving Joy rope, allowing her to continue, letting her reveal exactly how far she was willing to go with this attack. And Joy, confident in her ability to dominate any conversation, walked right into it. "Well, for starters," Joy continued, clearly enjoying herself now, feeding off what she interpreted as Jason being defensive, maybe something that doesn't glorify toxic masculinity. "Your characters are always these macho men who solve every problem with their fists. Don't you think that sends a terrible message, especially to young boys?" The studio audience was dead silent. Even the camera operators seemed to sense something building, some tension accumulating like pressure before an explosion. Jason's publicist, sitting in the wings, looked like she wanted to disappear. This was spiraling far beyond normal interview territory into something unprecedented. "Toxic masculinity," Jason repeated slowly, his voice dropping an octave, becoming quieter but somehow more intense. "That's interesting coming from someone who's made a career out of attacking people on television." Joy's eyes flashed. She'd been challenged, and her instinct was to escalate rather than retreat. "Excuse me? I think you're confusing holding people accountable with attacking them. That's exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about." "Holding people accountable," Jason said, his voice remaining dangerously calm, the kind of quiet that precedes violence in his films, but here channeled into something more devastating. Pure, verbal precision. Is that what you call it when you spend 20 minutes tearing apart someone's life's work without knowing the first thing about what goes into making these films? Sarah Haynes jumped in, desperately trying to redirect before this escalated further. "Maybe we should talk about the stunts in your new movie, Jason. I heard you do most of them yourself." But Joy wasn't finished. She'd drawn blood, sensed vulnerability, and her instinct was to press the attack rather than gracefully pivot. This was what she did, what she'd always done, what she'd been rewarded for doing throughout her career. "Oh, I know plenty about your movies, Jason," Joy said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I know they make billions of dollars selling the fantasy that problems can be solved with violence. I know they perpetuate harmful stereotypes about what it means to be a man. And I know that intelligent actors like yourself could choose to do better." That was the moment. The line crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Joy had just called his work harmful, dismissed his fans as dupes, and suggested he was wasting his intelligence. And she'd done it with a smile, with theatrical confidence, assuming he would just absorb it like every other guest who'd been bullied on this show over the years. But Jason Statham wasn't like other guests. And Joy Behar was about to learn that the hard way. Jason's hands clasped tightly in front of him. The camera caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his breathing had changed, the micro-expressions that suggested a man reaching the absolute limit of his patience. "Intelligence," he said quietly, the word carrying such weight that it silenced even the studio's ambient noise. That's rich coming from someone who just suggested that action films have no artistic merit and that millions of fans around the world are too stupid to understand the difference between entertainment and reality. "I never said the fans were stupid," Joy shot back, but her voice carried less certainty now. She could sense something shifting, could feel the control of this conversation slipping from her grasp. "Right," Jason said, his voice growing harder with each word. "So, the problem isn't with the audience, it's with me. Because I choose to make films that people actually want to watch, instead of pretentious art house pieces that 12 people see in independent theaters." Sonny hosts an attempt at mediation. "I think what Joy is trying to say is, I can speak for myself." "Thank you," Joy snapped, not taking her eyes off Jason, unwilling to concede any ground. "What I'm trying to say is that actors of your caliber have choices. You could use your influence to make films that challenge people, that make them think, that address real social issues. Instead, you take the easy money and make the same mindless action movie over and over again." The word mindless hung in the air like a detonation waiting to happen. Jason was no longer the relaxed movie star who'd walked onto the set 30 minutes earlier. His entire demeanor had shifted, and everyone in the studio could feel it. The gathering storm, the moment before everything changes. Jason stood up from his chair. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. Guests don't stand up during view interviews. They sit, they smile, they deflect, they maintain the illusion of friendly conversation even when being attacked. But Jason Statham had just shattered that illusion, and his physical presence, all 6 feet of muscle and controlled intensity, now towered over the panel. "Let me tell you something about mindless. Joy," Jason said, his voice controlled, but carrying an unmistakable edge that made everyone in the studio hold their breath. "Mindless is sitting behind a desk every day taking cheap shots at people who actually create something. Mindless is thinking that your opinion about my work matters more than the millions of people who choose to spend their hard-earned money watching these films." Joy's face flushed red, but she wasn't backing down. "Sit down, Jason. You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Jason asked, remaining standing, his presence filling the entire set. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you invited me here under false pretenses. This isn't an interview. It's an ambush. You've spent the last 10 minutes insulting my work, my choices, and essentially calling me and my fans idiots." Whoopi tried to regain control, her voice carrying warning. "Okay, everyone, let's just take a breath here." "No, Whoopi," Jason said, his eyes never leaving Joy, his voice steady as steel. "I think Joy wants to have this conversation. So let's have it. Joy, tell me, What exactly have you contributed to the world of entertainment? What lasting impact have you made beyond sitting here every day complaining about what other people do? Joy's mouth fell open. Nobody talked to her like this, not on her own show, not in her domain where she controlled the dynamic and dictated the terms of engagement. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, you arrogant. Being in the business and contributing to it are two different things, Jason interrupted. His control absolute, his logic devastating. I've created characters that inspire people. I've made films that bring families together in theaters. I've worked with stunt teams and filmmakers who push the boundaries of what's possible on screen. What do? You tear people down for a living. The other hosts were frantically looking at producers off stage. This was spiraling way beyond anything they'd prepared for. Entering territory that might require cutting to commercial, or even ending the interview entirely. Sarah Haynes made another desperate attempt to redirect. Jason, maybe we could talk about your upcoming projects. No, Sarah, Joy said, her voice rising, her face now crimson with anger, and something that might have been embarrassment at being challenged so effectively. I want to finish this conversation. Jason, you want to know what I contribute? I hold people accountable. I ask the tough questions that other interviewers are too scared to ask. I don't just sit here and let celebrities come on and promote their garbage without challenging them. Jason laughed, but there was absolutely no humor in the sound. Challenging them? Is that what you call this amateur hour psychoanalysis? You think you're some kind of hard-hitting journalist, but you're just a talk show host who gets off on making people uncomfortable. How dare you? Joy shot back, standing up herself now, her composure completely shattered. I've been asking important questions about society and culture for decades. Just because you can't handle having your work critiqued doesn't mean I'm wrong. Critiqued? Jason's voice carried genuine disbelief. You think calling someone's life's work violence porn and mindless is critique? That's not critique, Joy. That's just being cruel. There's a difference between thoughtful analysis and mean-spirited attacks designed to make yourself feel superior. Sonny tried one more time. I think we're all getting a little heated here. Maybe we should. You know what the real problem is, Joy? Jason continued, his voice dropping back to that controlled intensity that was somehow more powerful than any shouting. The real problem is that you've spent so long attacking people from behind this desk that you've forgotten what it's like to have skin in the game. You've forgotten what it's like to put yourself out there, to create something, to risk failure. I put myself out there every day, Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction now. Do you? Jason challenged. When's the last time you created something that could be judged? When's the last time you made yourself vulnerable? You sit here in complete safety, protected by your position, your panel, your network, and you throw stones at people who are actually doing things. That's not courage, Joy. That's cowardice. The words landed like physical blows. Joy's face went through several emotions rapidly. Anger, hurt, recognition, more anger. That's not fair. I never said. You said plenty. Jason cut her off, his voice absolute. You said my work was mindless. You said I was irresponsible. You said I was wasting my talent. You said I was contributing to societal problems. You accused me of promoting toxic masculinity while demonstrating the most toxic behavior I've encountered in any interview. And now you want to pretend like that wasn't an attack? The studio was so quiet, you could hear individual people breathing. The camera operators kept zooming in on Joy's face, which showed a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that might have been fear not of physical harm, but of losing control of her own show, of being exposed as someone who dishes out but can't take criticism herself. I have the right to express my opinion, Joy said weakly. Her earlier aggression completely deflated. and I have the right to call out your opinion as uninformed, mean-spirited, and hypocritical." Jason replied immediately, his logic a steamroller. "You talk about toxic masculinity, but what would you call using your platform to tear down someone who can't fight back on equal terms? What would you call ambushing a guest who came here expecting a professional interview?" Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now. "I wasn't ambushing anyone." "Then what would you call it?" Jason demanded. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided before I even walked in here that you were going to make me the villain in whatever narrative you had planned for today's show." He shook his head with genuine disgust. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy. You had a chance to have an interesting conversation with someone who's dedicated his life to entertaining people. You could have asked about the craft of acting, about working with directors, about the evolution of action cinema, about the real physical risks and challenges of this kind of work. Instead, you chose to be small, petty, and cruel." Joy tried one more time to regain some semblance of control. "I think you're being unfair to me, Jason. I was just trying to..." "To what?" Jason interrupted. "To embarrass me? To make yourself look smart by making me look stupid? To prove some point about masculinity by being more aggressive than any man would dare to be on television?" The words hit their mark. Joy's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment she looked genuinely hurt. But Jason wasn't finished. He was just getting to the devastating conclusion of his argument. "You want to talk about responsibility, Joy? How about your responsibility to treat people with basic human decency? How about your responsibility to your audience to have guests on who can actually contribute to meaningful conversation instead of just serving as targets for your frustrations?" He started moving toward the edge of the set, unhooking his microphone with deliberate calm. "How about your responsibility to yourself to be better than this?" Joy finally found some of her fight again, her voice rising desperately. "Where are you going?" "We're not finished here." Jason turned back to her one last time, his expression carrying something between pity and disappointment. "Oh, we're finished, Joy. We were finished the moment you decided to make this personal instead of professional." He looked directly into the main camera, speaking now to millions watching at home. "I came here to talk about my new film, to connect with fans, and to have what I hoped would be an enjoyable conversation. Instead, I got a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview." Joy stood up abruptly, her voice shrill. "You can't just walk out. This is my show." "Your show?" Jason smiled coldly. "Then maybe you should start acting like a professional host instead of a schoolyard bully." The production assistants were frantically signaling to the hosts, clearly trying to figure out how to handle this unprecedented situation. Jason handed his microphone to a stunned production assistant. "You know what, Joy?" he said, his voice softening slightly, which somehow made his words even more devastating. "I actually feel sorry for you. It must be exhausting to be so angry all the time. It must be lonely to push away everyone who tries to have a genuine conversation with you." Joy's voice cracked. "I'm not angry. I'm passionate about." "You're angry," Jason said simply, with the certainty of absolute truth. "And you're taking it out on people who don't deserve it. That's not passion. That's just sad." He turned to the other hosts, his voice respectful. "Whoopi, Sarah, Sonny, thank you for trying to keep things civil. I'm sorry your colleague made that impossible." As Jason walked toward the exit, Joy made one final desperate attempt to have the last word, to regain some control of a situation that had completely escaped her. "This is exactly the kind of toxic behavior I was talking about. Walking away when challenged, refusing to engage with difficult questions." Jason stopped at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. His voice was calm now, almost gentle, which somehow made his final words even more absolutely devastating. "Joy, The only toxic thing in this studio today was your behavior. The only person who refused to engage with difficult questions was you, because you never asked any. You just hurled insults and called it journalism. And the only person who should be ashamed of what happened here is you." He paused, looking directly at her with something approaching genuine concern. "I hope someday you figure out the difference between being challenging and being cruel. Your audience deserves better. Your guests deserve better. And honestly, you deserve better too." With that, Jason Statham walked off the view set, leaving behind a stunned studio, speechless hosts, and Joy Behar looking smaller than anyone had ever seen her look before. The cameras kept rolling for another few seconds, capturing Joy's face as she realized that for once in her career, she had absolutely nothing to say. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Within minutes of the show airing, clips of the confrontation flooded every social media platform: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all pulsed with the same footage. Jason standing over the panel, Joy's face crumpling, the devastating final words before his exit. The reactions divided along clear lines. Action film fans celebrated Jason for defending their genre against elitist dismissal. Finally, someone stood up to these talk show bullies. One viral tweet declared. Others praised his restraint. He destroyed her with logic and composure, not violence. That's real strength. But Joy's defenders pushed back, arguing she'd asked legitimate questions about violence in media, and Jason had overreacted. "If you can't handle tough questions, don't go on talk shows," critics tweeted. Entertainment outlets rushed to cover the confrontation. Jason Statham walks off the view after heated exchange, read one headline. Joy Behar left speechless. After Jason Statham defends action films, read another. Think pieces proliferated about celebrity journalism, about the toxicity of ambush interviews, about whether Joy had crossed a line or Jason had been too sensitive. But the overwhelming sentiment across platforms and political affiliations was clear. Jason Statham had been absolutely right to defend himself, and Joy Behar had been exposed as someone who could dish out attacks but couldn't handle being called out for it. What started as Joy Behar's attempted takedown of action cinema became Jason Statham's masterclass in maintaining composure under attack, in defending your work without losing your dignity, and in proving that sometimes the most powerful response to bullying is calm, logical devastation rather than matching the aggression. Jason walked onto that set to promote a movie. He walked off having reminded everyone that British restraint, when finally broken, becomes something more powerful than any cinematic explosion, controlled fury backed by unassailable logic that leaves no room for comeback, no space for spin. Nothing but the devastating truth that some people shouldn't start fights they can't finish.